Test, test, test. Hey YouTube. What's going on this cool and beautiful Saturday afternoon for you guys? I checked. It is Saturday. It is the proper time. And here I am. Once again, I am bereft of topics in off-topic news. For those of you that have been waiting for Mountain Blade Bannerlord to drop, hey Larry D's, welcome to the stream. For those of you who've been waiting for 7 years for Mountain Blade Bannerlord, Mountain Blade 2, it is supposed to now go to beta March of next year. So it's a little bit of off-topic news, but something that a lot of people, or some people in the gaming world, have been waiting for. And I'd invite you to go look up the videos. Hey Kaylor, thanks for the sound check. I've been watching your videos, Bob. Your stuff is coming along nicely. So it is starting to get cooler. I've had to go around and check a bunch of my heaters to make sure that my heaters are functioning properly, and I would advise that for anybody that's starting to get cooler weather. There's different ways of testing heaters, but it's just a good idea to go ahead and get that done and over with. And my stream health is showing no data, no active stream. Okay. Well, I'm not sure what that all means. As far as I can tell, I'm still alive. Let's see what's been going on lately. I know a lot of people are gearing up for many of the shows that are coming. I would always advise you to go to one of these shows, even if you don't go regularly. If you can catch one a year, or if you can catch one every other year, you will find yourself better connected with the community, in the sense of Larry D says, I have a heater that I need to replace. It keeps strobe lighting. Yeah, this is the time of year to start really checking on your heaters. Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. How's Laura doing on this fine, cooler Saturday? Anyway, I just, for those of you that have never gone to an event, I would just really encourage you to search out and find a local event, something that you can get to easily. You know, if you can drive 4 or 5 hours and get to it, you may have to spend the night. You know, you can You can usually find a hotel that's not too outrageously expensive. Hey, Alien World Aquatics, welcome to the stream. Um, I just think it is an experience for people that have never done it before. I'm glad to hear it, Laura. Um, it's you know, most of us feel like we're basically by ourselves in the sense that there are not a lot of people local to us. You know, in some cases. In some cases, this is different. But a lot of us feel like that we are basically alone in our fish keeping, that we keep fish and no one in our area keeps fish too. And that couldn't be further from the truth. There are tons and tons of fish keepers out there. And if you cannot connect with a local club, I mean, I know a lot of clubs are going through rough times right now. People don't have a lot of money. They can't afford to, hook up with clubs. They spend their money on fish or tanks or stuff like that. And basically they just connect via the internet, you know, places like my live stream, YouTube, other live streams, groups online, and that's fine and dandy. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not a valid thing. It is, but when you get a chance to get in a giant crowd, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people that all have the same interests that you do, that all have the same passion, a passion in the same area that you do, it really makes a huge difference. It makes it so that you understand that not only are you not alone, but there are thousands of people out there that are doing exactly the same kinds of things you are, or are doing things that are very similar, or are doing things that leave you in the dust. You feel like you're a pretty good breeder, and you feel like you're someone fairly important, and you go to one of these shows and go to the room sales in the hotel. You discover that there are people out there who really are experts at what they're doing. People that really, really are nose deep in this hobby, that actually can breed all kinds of things in such a way that it is profitable for them to take some of their fish for sale to hotel rooms and put a sign up on their door and have trays of fish. Mostly they're young fish, but occasionally you will get someone that brings in an older fish, some of their breeding stock that's aging, and they want to sell it. You can find incredible stuff at one of these shows that has room sales in the hotel. Now, a lot of times these shows are in hotels where they won't allow room sales. They don't want people to be matriculating all through the hotel. But most of the time, these events also have room sales. And room sales are one of the most fun, interesting things that comes as a sideline to one of these events. You go to the talks, you tour the vendors, you tour the whatever kind of fish show is going on, and a lot of times you'll have an ACA sanctioned event or a live bear sanctioned event, and Then afterwards, there are groups of people that go out to dinner together. There are groups of people that get together and talk shop. And then there are rooms all through the hotel on almost every floor. Sometimes not the first floor, but a lot of times the upper floors will have room after room after room with a sign on the door, and you just have to wait until the door is open. You know, those people are going to talks and eating and doing all kinds of stuff too, so the door is not always open. But all you have to do is wait for the door to be open, or sometimes the sign says knock. If they're just not open, but it will open for um, people that are interested in buying what's on their list. You can get plants, you can get hardware, you can get just anything that's involved with the fish keeping hobby that you can imagine. They will have it for sale at their show, in their rooms at the show. And that is one of my favorite things to do. I enjoy that more than most all of the other parts of the show. And you can get some amazing deals. You know, these people have come 3, 4, 700 miles and brought all these fish with them and tanks and stuff, and they don't want to carry all that stuff back home. They want to sell it while they're there. You know, maybe it's paying for their trip, maybe it's paying for their hotel room and their meals. They need to sell those things, and so you can haggle sometimes. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes their prices are locked down and set at what they are, but it just gives you a whole different perspective on what's out there, what people are doing. And if you talk to people at the show, if you talk to people in the room sales, if you talk to people at the speaker events, you will suddenly find people from your own state, your own town, and you will begin to realize that you are not alone in fish keeping. You aren't the only person on the planet that loves keeping fish and works really hard at it and has an area of expertise and is trying to advance their craft. It's just kind of fulfilling to meet other people that are local and make new friends and find out that there are a lot of people around you that are doing the same thing. And it's always a good deal. You know, you might run into club politics. You might have personality conflicts with some people, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take advantage of the fact that there are people around you that are doing the same thing, and there are enough of them out there that you can find someone that you have a simpatico with, that you click with, someone that actually helps you along in your hobby, or that you can help along in the hobby. And those things are just they're life affirming, and it's just fun. It's just plain fun to do that sort of thing. You spend a little money, you eat some strange food, you get out of the house, you get out of your normal routine, and you go down on the showroom floor, and there's 200 people that feel like about fish exactly like you do, that are fish nerds, that are true aquarists, that may be some of the top people in the hobby, and you don't even know who they are because they're just walking around on the floor looking like you are. And you go to a vendor and you think, this is just some guy trying to make some money, and they don't care anything. And it turns out that they're one of the most important people in the hobby, and they're right there, sitting there for you to talk to, and you can glean decades and decades and decades of experience just from that one person that's sitting there trying to sell you a thing of food or a Pleco cave or something like that. And I'm just trying to get across the value of going to one of these shows, and we're in the season now where they start coming regularly. And if you look around, you can find some. And they may not be really close to you, but if you can afford to, I would highly recommend that you go. You know, some of us are on fixed incomes. Some of us can't really afford to spend a whole lot. We have other life stories, and I understand all that. But that doesn't mean that if one's close to you, you can't drive from your house to going. Laura's asking me, am I going to any this year? It's a good question, Laura, and I want to go. The Ohio Cichlid Extravaganza is going to have Chris Biggs and Bob's saying true, a lot of fish keepers are not on YouTube and some share in other forums, particularly academics. Yeah, a lot of the old school people don't. Laura, to answer your question, I want to go to Aquashella and I want to go to OCA, the Ohio Cichlid Association Extravaganza, because Chris Biggs is going to be at OCA, and everybody's going to be at Aquashella. You know, I could rub shoulders with Corey and Joseph again, and everybody. You know, all the sellers that go, all the people that are there. They're going to have a great list of speakers. And I've not been to Aquashella before, so I'd like to go. But my wife is going on vacation about the 17th of next month, and I may literally not have the vehicle nor the cash to go do it. So I'm just going to have to play it by ear and see if I can make one or the other. I'd love to make both. I'm not sure if I can or not. Those hotel rooms in Chicago are pretty danged expensive, and even the ones in Cleveland are pretty dear. But I'd love to make one or both of those shows this year. Those are the, you know, Aquashella and Aquatic Experience are the kinds of shows that I look out for. I miss the live bearers here in town. Larry D says, I'm looking forward to Aquashella. Probably the only time I'll be going, saving money for this event. And yeah, Larry, I really encourage that. You know, it's not like I'm telling you to spend money you don't have and to, you know, throw away the funds for your fish keeping for a year just to go to one of these shows. That's not what I'm all about. I'm saying if it is within your means to do it, and you can find, you know, say you want to go and you can't really afford a hotel, you can't really afford getting there, look around, ask around. You may find someone else that's local, that's going. Find a local board and ask if anyone's going to Aquashella or to OCA, and ask if you can help pay for gas, you know, or share a room, or sleep in the car. You know, there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to stay in the hotel where the event is. There's usually another close by hotel that might be cheaper. You know, there might be a bed and breakfast. There might be a Airbnb that you can get more cheaply, that you can share with someone else. Uh, if you really work at it, you can find a way. I mean, heck, if you can find a ride and afford the tickets to get in, you might just wing it. If I was young, I would just wing it and see if I could find somebody to crash with and sleep on their couch. You know, you can get by on a lot less money than is normal spending. If it's the older of us, the ones that are older are the ones that usually need their creature comforts a lot, and we tend to want to stay in a hotel room and, you know, eat regular meals and that kind of stuff, sleep in a bed as opposed to sleeping in a car seat. But if you're young, you can, you know, you can bring a sleeping bag and find a spot and crash, you know. In the good old days, I would do those sorts of things myself, but my back, my shoulders, my age is just doesn't allow me to quite fly like that anymore. I suppose I could sleep in the vehicle, but I'm probably going to be pretty dang cranky when I wake up in the morning. All right, that's my rant about why you should go to these shows. Larry says, me and a buddy are going on Saturday only. Have a tank set up for some nano fish. Nice. And yeah, if you can only make it for one day, just one day, you know, 10 hours is enough for some people. But you will, even in that short of a time span, you will find amazing values. You will make connections that may last you a lifetime. You know, the fish keeping hobby, as many people as I'm trying to convince you that there are in it, the fish keeping hobby is small enough to where you will meet the same people over and over and over again until they retire and drop out of active hobbying. But I just want to impress upon you the value of the connections of the people that you can meet at these shows. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen for you. Your mileage may vary. You may go and say, what a waste of time, I'm never doing that again. And if so, then you've had that experience. You've ticked that box off so that you don't need to worry about it anymore. From then on out, you can say, nope, those shows are not for me. I don't like crowds. I don't like hotel food. I don't like not sleeping in my own bed, you know. But at least once you should go and try. And in the process, you're supporting the hobby. You know, that will, your ticket, your hotel sales will convince the hobby to have more shows or to continue to have the same amount of shows. You know, this is one of the things that you learn in life is as you go along, is if you want for something to be there for you to access, if you find a Chinese restaurant that makes the best darn Chinese in the world, and you've been needing a Chinese restaurant in your life, and you find it and you're just overjoyed, don't just be overjoyed. Patronize that restaurant. Otherwise, it's going to close its doors. Tell your friends about it. Take them to the restaurant. Encourage others to go and check them out. You know, everybody's not going to like it. Everybody doesn't need a great Chinese restaurant in their life. But what I'm trying to say is you have to cultivate the things that you like. And if you don't know that you like it, if you've never gone to that Chinese restaurant and eaten there, then how are you going to know that it's the best restaurant for you to cultivate and to keep open? Hey, Joseph, welcome to the stream, man. I'm talking about events, Joseph. I'm trying to convince people that they should cultivate these fish keeping events in the hobby so that they are there for them to use. Hey, Candy. I'm glad I made you hungry for Chinese. I'm just using, because after you live in a place for a long time, you begin to recognize that if you don't go to this restaurant, if you don't go twice a month or 3 times a month to that restaurant and keep it open, then it's not going to be there when you want to go to it. It's going to close its doors because nobody's patronizing it. Nobody keeps it open. And I'm just using a restaurant as an example of the ways that we need to cultivate, we need to patronize parts of the fish keeping hobby so that they keep the doors open. You know, it's great to say, man, everything at my local store is so expensive. I'm going to buy everything online, and then that way, you will have the opportunity to go to another event because you have gone to the one before and they have recognized how many people are interested and willing to spend money to keep this event going, and they will do it again. Whereas if nobody shows up, if they give the event and 10 people show up over 3 days, they're going to say, not so much. We're not doing this again next year. And that's why I'm trying to encourage you to go to these events, to patronize. Bob says, I've been thinking about how water is affected by sounds. In particular, how sound affects tanked fish. I have not researched it at all yet. Thinking about the noises at an event jarred my memory. I can tell you that think about in the wild, think about what kind of environmental effects there are in the wild that fish have for eons dealt with. Other animals in the water making noises, trees falling in the water, cattle, wild beasts in the water, the sound of rocks being pushed and rolled along through a heavy flow. Yep, Joseph. That's why I haven't stopped using these photos. Every time I look at them, I get all these memories flooding back in. I do know one of the things in my experience that freak fish out more than anything else is not so much sound, but movement. If you have a fish tank that is on unsteady ground, if you have a fish tank on a floor that is flexible in the sense that if you walk across the room and you can see the water vibrating in the fish tank, or you can see the water moving in the fish tank, I have found that that disturbs fish more than anything that I know of. Now, I keep using the example of my pacus. I had 3 22-inch pacus in a 150-gallon tank when I lived in the... You guys had an earthquake, Joseph? Are you all right? I'm sure that freaked your fish out, didn't it? Now see, that is a way that fish would feel shaking like I'm talking about. That seems to bother fish, in my experience, more than just about anything. I keep bringing up my experience of having 3 20-inch pacus. You know, when I got in the hobby and I started getting to the point where I could really keep fish alive, and I was going to, back in the day in Texas, in Plano, Dallas area, I had maybe 10 local stores that were open. It was, I didn't realize how good I had it. I just thought that was the normal way things were. But if you live in a large town, you may have several local fish stores at your beck and call. And so me and a buddy of mine, we'd go on Saturday, or we'd go on the day we knew they got new fish in, and we'd go hit 5 or 6 of the best stores in a circuit. And I got to know pretty well what stock was on hand in all these fish stores, local fish stores, and when they got new stock in. And some of them I was selling fry to you know, pay for food or to pay for fish when I bought them. I never got any cash money out of the deal. It was always in exchange. And they loved to do that because they could make more money off of the fry, and then they were selling stock too. Because I was taking away cans of food, or I was taking away some of the fish they had in, or I was taking away fish from other local breeders. And after a while, I started recognizing that a lot of these stores had a mascot pacu. People would buy little pacus and raise them up. You couldn't get piranhas down there because they were afraid they would survive in the local waterways and eat all of the Texas population that went swimming. But you could get pacus because pacus aren't meat eaters. And so a lot of people would buy 1-inch pacus, how cute they are, and raise them up until they were 10 inches long and could no longer fit in the 20-gallon tank they were bought and put in. And then they would bring them back to the fish store and either just give them to the fish store or turn them in for value. And I started noticing these pacus that were really big being just kept in miserable conditions. You know, maybe they had a 100-gallon tank and a big old giant pacu in it with all these other, you know, regular fish that they were keeping in a display tank. And so I started going around buying them up. I wanted to rescue those fish, and I had a 150-gallon tank, big giant old 150-gallon I can't remember the make of it. Um, it may have been a Dell, but I'm not sure. But it was 7/8 glass. The darn thing weighed about 300, 400 pounds dry when you pick it up. It was a giant tank, and I had two of them, and so one of them I think I was keeping jaguars in it, and I got tired of the jaguars, and I was just mainly breeding Jack Dempseys, or one of my pair died. Wait, can fish hear? That's an excellent question. I know they can feel vibrations, but I'm going to say yes, they can hear. That even if it's not hearing like we experience hearing, I'm going to say that the vibrations that sound produces can be picked up by their lateral lines. Fish have a lateral line that is evolved into a sensory object that allows them to sense vibrations so that they can catch prey or so they can avoid being preyed upon, and they will recognize the different sounds that different fish make. I think it's also electrically sensitive, so they can recognize and perceive the electrical aura, if you will, of other fish that are near. You know, electric eels definitely give off an electric aura, but I think that all fish, in one way or another, give off maybe some of the hagfishes, some of the really lampreys, some of the really ancient stock, maybe they don't because they didn't really develop a lot of electrochemical kind of activity by that evolutionary stage. But I think even a hagfish has a primitive lateral line. So, Laura, maybe they don't hear in the sense that we hear, but I'm going to say that they do perceive the vibrations that sound gives off. You know, so if you're shouting in a room, they can hear it. And I would, the story that I'm telling in depth about my pacus, I ended up rescuing 3 from local stores, the mascots from local stores. Hey Pam, welcome to the stream. Laura says Google suggests they have an inner ear inside the fish's head, which consists of small bones that move in response to vibration. The movement of these bones displaces sensory cells, which the brain interprets as sound. Yeah, I mean, that's basically how we hear sound too, Laura. Ours is more highly developed. We have a stirrup and all the bones which are corresponding with hearing sound in our ear canal, and that canal, those bones work together to press on a liquid-filled area that has lots of little hairs in it, and that's the way we process sound, is through the vibration of those bones and the hairs in our, what is it, cochlea? I think that's what that organ's called. That's where the fluid is that that stays around the hairs that interpret sounds. So yes, they interpret the vibrations of sound, and I was going to clarify it by also mentioning that painting my new fish rack now, excited, kid in a candy store. Grats, Joseph. I'm glad you got to that point, man. I I got those pacus when they were about 10 or 12 inches long, and I put the three of them eventually into that 150-gallon tank that I had, and it was on an old wrought iron stand that it came with, and it sat behind my couch in front of the picture window in my duplex that I lived in Texas, in Plano. And I had that duplex for 6 years, 7 years, I guess. I was living there. Maybe 10 years. It was close to 10 years. Anyway, those fish got to be 20 inches long. I think he meant painting, Pam, not planting. If planting a rack would grow more racks, I would be in business. But those fish got to be 20 inches long at least. I think one of them was 23 inches long. And I fed them koi pond. They made little curlicue looking things that looked like macaroni back in the day for koi ponds. And I fed them those, and I fed them fruit occasionally. I would throw fruit in there for them to eat. And their favorite thing in the world that I discovered to eat, I had 2 chow dogs, and their favorite thing in the world that I discovered to eat was gravy train, a great big gravy train nugget. I would throw 2 or 3 of those in the tank, and those fish would get those gravy train nuggets, and they would spin them around in front of their mouth and take little nibbles off of it as it got wet, and they could bite it off easily, and they would take little chunks, and they would play for 10 minutes with one gravy train ball nugget and spin that thing around and eat it. They would spit it out and purposely let it go towards the top of the water and then run grab it again. Pam says she feeds her turtles cat food. Yeah. Well, I couldn't keep using gravy train in that tank. I would have to have vacuumed and cleaned it every day because it made such a mess in the tank. And pacus don't have a very well developed digestive tract, and so basically what goes in them comes right back out of them again and is all over your tank. And so I couldn't, I mean, I tried feeding them gravy train, but it was a slippery descending slope. I just really didn't like all of the water changes and vacuuming I had to do. And I kept them in a bare bottom tank. I tried, a log in there, but they are so, once they get to that size, they just basically need open water to swim in. And those 3 pacus were some of the most enjoyable fish I've ever kept. I've since seen people that have big giant tanks, like a 220 or 200-gallon tank that just has one giant pacu in it. They are so personable. They have those great big eyes. They watch everything that's going on around them They interact with you like a pet dog does. They know you. They know when you're going to feed them. They know when they want you to feed them. They will sulk when their water needs changed. They will talk to you basically. They pop their jaws as one of their forms of communication, and they will sit there and pop their jaws at you to get your attention if you're not paying enough attention to them. And I really enjoyed those three fish, and they would sleep at night mid-water in that 150-gallon, all three of them side by side in one end of the tank. And that's where they were when a particularly heavy and very local thunderstorm happened in the middle of the night. This was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and my chows woke me up barking like someone was trying to get in the house, and I jumped up and immediately was greeted by loud thunder and lightning flashing outside the window. And this is why I was telling Haley the other day to please put a heavy curtain on the window behind her tank, because of this one experience of mine, that fish in the wild are used to lightning and thunder, but it happens above them. They're looking up at it. But in one of our unnatural tanks with glass sides, they're experiencing thunder and lightning beside them, not above them coming down, but beside them. And beside them is a much different experience than above them. So they've got the bright flash of light, the huge, anytime a bolt of lightning strikes really close, you know how you see the lightning and then you count 1001, 1002, 1003. If you get to 1006, it means that the lightning is a mile away, because it takes 6 seconds for the sound to reach you from a mile away. Well, if the bolt of lightning strikes right outside your window, the thunder is instantaneous. And not only is it instantaneous, but it will rattle the windows. It will pop the windows out of your place. And that's what had happened. I had curtains up, but they were just regular drapes. And it never occurred to me that I was putting my fish at risk by having that light drape blocking lightning. And I finally clicked off what was going on, and I ran from the bedroom, and before I got to the living room, I was splashing in water. And what had happened was that those 3 pacus side by side experienced a lightning bolt striking just outside the window behind their tank, and the immediate thunder that came with that lightning bolt and the shaking of that tank, and they all exploded. And by exploded, I mean they literally flipped their bodies back and forth, and the 3 of them together produced enough pressure to literally tear 7/8 inch glass away from 7/8 inch glass, and it bent the top of that glass out about an inch from the other glass, and the caulking tore all the way down to about 2 inches from the bottom of the tank. They literally exploded so hard in that tank, side by side, that they burst a seam. One seam The glass did not break. It literally bent an inch from what, 3.5 foot tall. In 3.5 foot tall, it literally bent an inch by the top, and it tore that caulking out of that seam. And I got to that tank, and there was 2 inches of water in my living room floor, and there was 120 gallons of water out of the tank, and 2 of those pacus had already jumped out of the tank because they were laying sideways. I had the tops on the tank, but in that situation they were so freaked out that they jumped hard enough to literally jump out of that tank and were laying on the floor, snapping their jaws and flopping, and they had been there a little while. I lost those 2 fish almost immediately. They died. I had a 110 gallon that I had set up that had a couple of new fish in it, and I immediately scooped them up off the floor and dropped them in that 110. But they had been on the floor long enough that they did not recover. One of the pacus was still in the tank, laying in 2 inches of water, breathing on 1 gill, and expiring. And I also scooped it out and put it in that tank. The other 2 fish promptly died and went to my freezer, and that fish hung on. The one that was still in the tank hung on for 3 days. I was literally taking a power head and sticking a hose from the power head, sucking air into its mouth to force air through its gills to keep it alive, and eventually it expired as well. And I wrote a poem about fixing that tank. It's in one of the poem sections. If you go and look on my that's why I know personally that a flash of light and a blast of thunder very close by are well perceived by fish. They may not hear it like we hear it, but they know it. They know exactly what it is, and it freaked those fish the heck out. And that's an experience I won't soon forget. That's an experience that I hope none of you go through. That's an experience of why I tell people with tanks behind windows, with windows behind them, to either paint the back of their tanks really well, or to block the window with a heavy curtain. Hey Dank, welcome to the stream. He says his turtles get Mazurki koi diet. Yeah, koi food is usually cheaper. Sometimes it's cheaper than other foods, and so a lot of us that are feeding heavily end up going to koi food because you can feed a lot of it, and it's not as hard on the wallet, and it usually has pretty decent diet. Well, that's what I fed those pacus. Back in the day, koi food. Yeah, Laura, when people ask me what my biggest fish tank disaster is, that's it. It's, I had really gotten attached to those pacus, and it really threw me to lose all 3 of them like that in such a catastrophic event. Believe me, 150 gallons of water on your floor, wherever you're living, is going to be a catastrophic event. It may kill the power in your house. It may destroy your carpets. It may wipe out any kind of electronics or furniture that's sitting on the floor. It's not something that I would recommend, although I would highly recommend keeping 3 20-inch Bakus in a 150-gallon tank. It was like having a pack of dogs living in a fish tank in my house. They interacted with my dogs. They interacted with my cats. They interacted with me. They would shun new people that came in the house. They would go and sulk and hide if it was someone they didn't recognize. They would eventually get used to you. If I let you feed them, they would begin to recognize you as a potential food source, and they would get to be friends with you too if you were around my place enough. My buddy that I went fish store hopping with, they got to know him. And actually, that buddy is the one that I bought the tank from. And he freaked out when I showed him what had happened to it. And eventually, yeah, fish are highly intelligent. Some of them more so than others. But don't for a second think that they don't have native intelligence, emotional responses, communication skills, awareness of the world around them. They are highly intelligent. They've been around for eons and eons and eons of evolution. They've learned how to survive. But I ended up taking that fish tank. I got my buddy to help me. I put a blanket down on a flat spot in the front yard. We carried the tank out and laid it down on that heavy blanket. And I took an X-Acto knife and a razor blade, and I slowly peeled all of that caulking that had given way. It had given way to about 2 inches from the bottom. And so I slowly carved it all out of that little gap that was because it was almost closed all the way down to the bottom. There was just an inch, like a 1/4 inch of a gap at the top. You know, they exploded so hard against that glass that they forced the top of it out about an inch. But it was 7/8 glass. So that only exposed about less than 1/4 of an inch of a gap at the top. But that was enough to tear it all the way down to about 2 inches high. You know, it was, you know, maybe down at 2 inches, it was 1/8 of an inch further out than than it had normally been. But I used an X-Acto knife and a razor blade. I peeled it all the way down to that 2-inch mark, to where I knew it was still sealed, because I didn't want to peel it all the way to the bottom and risk having the panel just completely change its location. So I got it down to there and then carved a little bit into that so that my caulking would have some place to set and seal. And then I took a hypodermic needle and managed to squeeze enough. It was a large bore hypodermic, but I managed to get it between the glasses and fill that space with caulking. But first, when I got it all peeled off, the glass was still sticking out at the top. And I thought, how am I going to get this glass to go back in where it needs to be? And finally, I sat on it. I just put my 200 pounds of body weight lightly on the top of it and kept easing my weight down on it. And finally, it just let go and popped right back into place where it was supposed to be before. And then I finished cleaning it up. I wiped it down with alcohol, and then I filled the gap with caulking between the two pieces of glass. And then when that dried, I left it out there all day long, and when that dried and cured, I put a really heavy bead of caulk from the bottom and went into both other corners with it, and then came all the way up the inside and sealed that whole corner. And after, 36 hours of sitting outside and drying, we carried it back in and set it back up on the stand, and I filled it up with water, and it held. And that tank held water for 23 years after that. And then I began to notice some rust on the wrought iron stand. And I finally tracked it down. It had sprung a leak about an inch down from the top. So if I filled the tank an inch and a half from the top, it wouldn't leak. But if I went ahead and filled it all the way to the top, it would leak. And after we had lived here about 10 or 12 years, I lost a couple of fish, and I just went dry. And I ended up donating that tank and several others, about 600 gallons worth of tanks, to the local fish club. And I told them that that tank had a slight leak at the top of it, but I didn't tell them the full story behind that 150 gallon and the 3 pacus. All right, guys, that's me killing an hour jabbering about fish keeping to you guys again. I guess I can be done telling my pacu tank story because I pretty much laid it all out there this time. I'm sorry if you've heard it before and it bored you to tears. Good luck with your fish. Have a great rest of the weekend. Start winterizing your tanks. Get ahead of the curve in case you have to buy stuff and need to space out the money. And think hard about finding a way to attending a local club meeting or a local event. Yep, Bob found the same stuff Laura did. Fish don't have exterior ears, but fish have lateral lines, and they use those lateral lines to pick up vibrations in the water. Their lateral lines consist of a channel with hairs in a fluid like our ears are, and those hairs feel the vibration that occurs around them, and they also experience electrical stimulation as well. And so they also pick up sound through their lateral line, the vibrations in the water. Justin Shepard, you got here right at the hour and 3-minute mark. And I am out. I have survived yet another hour live streaming on YouTube and blathered on about nothing, much ado about nothing for another hour. And I'm out, guys. Have a great rest of the weekend. Think real hard about finding a way to attend one of these local or national or world events that are going on in the fish hobby. If you can't afford it, don't sweat it. If you can afford it, think about trying it just so you can help cultivate and patronize these events so that they'll be there when I can afford it again and manage to make it to one. Just like the Chinese restaurant that I want to go eat at. So I want you all to go eat at that Chinese restaurant so it'll be there when I need to go eat at it. Have a good weekend, guys. Take good care of your fish. Good luck.